Hey friends, what up? Welcome back to Babylon Talmud. Today we're studying Daf Chav Tes, Daf 29 of Masechta Megilla. Friends, what do you think Daf Chav Tes talks about? Well, the first Amud of Chav Tes basically is interesting Agaritas, and then the second Amud, one second. And then the second Amud we talk about the four parshas, which is very interesting, right? Shkolim, Para. I don't know, what comes after that? There's a Chodesh, and then, what am I forgetting? Zachar, of course. Shkalim, Zachar, Par, and a Chodesh. So we're going to talk about that as well. So, very interesting stuff. Friends, let's jump in over here. We're mamish, all the way at the end of Daf Chav Ches Amud Beis. Tanu Rabbanon, the rabbis taught, now we're already in Chav Tes Amud Aleph, Mevatel Talmud Torah, L'tzoas Amesu, Achnosas Hakala, okay? So, Mevatel Talmud Torah, okay, to take out, to go to a levaya, to escort somebody who passed away to be buried with achnosa sakala, and to bring a bride to her wedding. All right. Amar Allah bar Yehuda bar Eloi. What? So they said about Rabbi Yehuda bar Eloi, Shem vatal Talmud Torah letzas ameis achnosa sakala, that he would be mevatel Talmud Torah, he would stop learning if there was somebody who passed away to escort, or a bride to take to the chuppah. All right. So we say, wait. So when do you stop your learning in order to escort somebody who passed away? So that's when he doesn't have everything that he needs, which we'll explain in a minute. But if he has everything that he needs, then you go weiter. And what's considered everything that he needs? Amr Shmuel bar Inyo, Mishmei Rav. So it says Shmuel bar Inyo in the name of Rav, Tracer Alfei Gavre, 12,000 people, Veshisa Alfei Shipuri, and 6,000 shofars. So if there are 12,000 people and 6,000 shofars, then you can keep learning. And those who say Tracer Alfei Gavri Umenayu Shisa Alfei Shipore. Okay? To those who say that, well, I don't know, 12,000 people, and of them 12,000 shofars. Alright, then I guess what, they can have 12,000 shofars? I don't know. Okay. Ula Amar Kigon Dechaitze Gavi me Avula Ad Sichra. So Ula says that if there are enough people that they create a human chain from the gate of the city until the cemetery. Sheshes says of Sheshes Kinesina Kach Netilasa, that like the Torah was given, that is also, when somebody passes away, Manasinoso B'Shishim Ribo, just like the Torah was given with 600,000 people, so Af Netilasa B'Samach Ribo, so also when a fellow passes away, I don't know, I guess there should be 600,000 people at the funeral. So then, if there are 600,000 people, so then you can continue learning. Now this applies to somebody who read Psukim, learned Mishnayos and Braisos, but a fellow who was a teacher, he taught Torah, so then even if there's 600,000, you should still interrupt your learning in order to go to the Levaya. Okay, let's go weiter. Tanya Reb Shimon ben Yochai Omer, so says Reb Shimon ben Yochai, what do you think he says? Come and see how beloved the Yidden are before God. Because whenever the Yidden found themselves in exile, the Eibishter was with them in the exile. They were exiled to Egypt. God was with them in Egypt. Shneimar, as the pasuk says, that I revealed myself to the house of your father when they were in Egypt. So that God was with them in Egypt. When they were exiled to Bavel, so the divine presence was with them in Bavel. Shneimar, as the pasuk says, L'manchem shilachti bavela, that I think the drash is that with you I sent to Bavel, I went to Bavel with you. Alright. Also, when the Yidden are going to be redeemed, well, the Eibishter is going to be with them at that point as well. Shneimar, as the pasuk says, "V'shava Hashem Elokecha es shvuscha," that God will return your captives from your captivity. V'heishiv lo nemer ela v'shav. It doesn't say that He will return them, rather v'shav. He will be returned, right? He will return with also the captives. He's going to be with them. Which teaches that God returns with them from the exile. Where's God in Bavel? Okay, right? It says that the Yidden were exiled to Bavel and God went there as well. Where is He? So Abai says, you know where He is? He's in the synagogue of Hutzel. That's where He is. As well as the Shav Yosef synagogue in Narda. The Rashi says that Yechonia, what does it say? It says Rashi, the Shav Yosef, that Yechonia and his entourage, they built this synagogue, the synagogue of Shav Yosef in Narda. Yechonia and the people and the people with him, they constructed this temple from the stones and dirt that they brought with them to exile from Eretz Yisrael. The Kaima Shenemar, to fulfill that which it says, Kiratzu Avadecha Savanel Vesafari Chonenu, that the Yidden, all they want is the stones and dirt of Eretz Yisrael. Wow. It's a schus that we have right now to be in Eretz Yisrael. I mean, I could see the stones and the dirt of Eretz Yisrael on my floor. Let's focus more on the stones. The mice is a shtickle dirt eichid. Not too much. Mostly stone. Alright. Fine. Vilo tema. Okay. So says Abaye that God in Bavel is in the synagogue at Hutzel and the synagogue of Shav Yosef in Narda. Interesting. Vilo tema hacha. Don't say that God's in both. Sometimes He's hanging out in Hutzel. Sometimes He's hanging out in Shav Yosef. I guess it depends on God's mood. Omer Abai says, Abai Teisi li d'chimarchikno parsa ailono matzlino awesome. So it says Abai that I should get reward because when I'm one parsa away from either one of these synagogues, I make a point of it to go in. All right, sounds very interesting. Avodah Shmuel v'Levi haviyas b'chnishta. The father of Shmuel as well as Levi, they were sitting in b'chnishta the Shav Yosef ben Arda in the synagogue in the Shav Yosef synagogue in Arda. Asya Shechina, and sure enough, the divine presence came there while they were sitting there. Shamu kol rigsha, and they heard a commotion. Kamu v'nafku, so they said, "We better get out of here." Rav Sheshes the Shav Yosef ben Arda. Rav Sheshes one time was sitting in this synagogue in this Shav Yosef synagogue in Arda. Asya Shechina v'lo nafak, and the divine presence came, and Rav Sheshes was sitting there, and he didn't get up, he didn't leave. Also, Malachi Asharis v'kamivaisule, and then the ministering angels came and they were threatening him. Amr lefanov. And he said, Rav Sheshes says, Ribono Shel Olam, Master of the world, Olav v'sheinu Olav minitchem pnei mi. If you have somebody who's downtrodden, and somebody who's not, somebody who's a nebuch, and somebody isn't, so who has to get up for whom? Mistama, Mistama, the person who's in the more difficult position, you leave him alone. And of course, Rav Sheshes was blind. So Rav Sheshes was said, it was saying, Eibishter, look what's going on. The ministering angels here, they're beating up a blind person. What do you expect me to do? So Amalu Shavku. So God said to the ministering angels, they said, hey, leave him alone. The pasuk in Yechezkel says, Va'ei loim lemikdash ma'at, that it will be for them for a small temple. Amar Rabbi Yitzchak elubate knesios uvate midrashu shebebavel. Says Rabbi Yitzchak that these small temples are a reference to the synagogues and study halls in Bavel. Rabbi Lazar Amar, and says Rabbi Lazar, Zebeisel shel Rabbeinu shebebavel. Says Rabbi Lazar that this Zebeis Rabbeinu, this is the Beis Hamedrash of Rav in Bavel. Darish Rava expounded. What does the pasuk mean? Hashemon ata yisulanu, that God, you were an abode for us. Elubate knesos uvate midrashos. This is a reference to the synagogues and the study halls. Amar Abaye, Says Abaye, initially, I would study Torah at home, and I would go to the synagogue to pray. Kim Deshamis lay the Kamer David. But once I heard that, which David HaMelech says, Hashem Ma'avti Beisecha, that God, I love your abode. Havagarisna b'vei knishta, I would learn in the synagogue. I wouldn't learn at my home anymore, right? Rava had said in the previous slide that when it says Hashem Ma'onata Yisalanu, it's a reference to synagogues and the study halls in Bavel. So Abaye would specifically, he wouldn't study at home anymore. He would make it a point to study in the synagogue. Tanya, we learn in a brisa, Rabbi Elazar Akaper Omer, says Rabbi Elazar Akaper, Osid Bate Knesios Bate Midrashu Shebebavel Sheikov Beis Yisrael. Then in the future, the synagogues and study halls of Bavel are going to be established in Eretz Yisrael. Shenemar, as the pasuk says, Ki Kitavi Bahar Muchakaimel Bayom Yavo, that like the mountain of Tavor and like Carmel in the sea, they will come. Now, if I understand correctly, something to do with like the mountain of Tavor and the Carmel mountains, I guess they like traveled a long distance to go to Har Sinai to hear like Ma'amad Har Sinai or something. So then they got to go to be in Eretz Yisrael. Of course, we have Tavor in Eretz Yisrael as well as Carmel. There's a street right next to where I live called Tavor Street. And isn't it a Kavachomer? That Tavor, right, the mountains of Tavor and Carmel, that they only came to Har Sinai to learn Torah for a brief period of time, during Matan Torah, and they merited to be established in Eretz Yisrael, these mountains. So, but the Knesios of the Midrashos. So certainly then, synagogues and study halls, Shekornu Marbitzin B'en Torah, that in these synagogues and study halls, they read Torah, they study Torah, they disseminate Torah, alachas kam v'chamad, and certainly they should be able to be established in Eretz Yisrael. Dorish by Kapara expounded. What does the pasuk mean? Lamatiratztun harim. How come the mountains are prancing? Right? Lamatiratztun harim gavnunim. Right? Why are you prancing, you majestic peaks? Oy, you majestic. I don't know. How would you like? Who was that guy's name? Who's the guy who wrote Moby Dick? No, I can't remember. Herman Melville. How would he write that? Lama Taratztun. I don't know. Why are you prancing, oh ye majestic peaks? Alright, Yotz Tabaskov Amr Loim, that a voice came out from the heaven and said to the other mountains, Lama Tirtzu Din im Sinai. Why do you have Burgess with Har Sinai? Kulchem Ba'alei Mumin Atem. After all, you all are blemished, Eitzel Sinai, with relative to Har Sinai. Ksiv Hacha says over here, Gavnunim, that it calls these other mountains, these Gavnunim mountains, these majestic peaks. Uksiv Hasam, and it says by what was it by Saras? That or by by Mumin. It says by Mums of a Kohen. So it says, where am I? Oh, Gibein Odak, that if you have like your eyebrows are like too long or something. So Amr Rav Ashi says, Avastish Mamina Haman Diyar Ba Mumu. So somebody who is haughty is a Baal Mum, right? That these other mountains, they kind of were complaining, and they were these like majestic mountains, and we were calling them a Baal Mum. Alright. So these other mountains, I guess, wanted to, they were upset, they had beef, they were braggers with Har Sinai, that Har Sinai got to get Matan Torah, but apparently these other mountains like had blemishes or whatever. Alright, so the Mishnah had said in also kapandria, that we don't make a synagogue into a shortcut. My kapandria, what does a kapandria mean? Rava kapandria kishma. Rava says, what do you mean, what's a kapandria? A kapandria is a kapandria. My kishma. So Gemara says, yeah, that's what we're saying. We don't get it. What's a kapandria? Don't tell me it's a kapandria. What's a kapandria? So Command Amr, Adam Afikna, Adari Eil B'ha. It's like a fellow says, well, instead of going around this row of houses, why don't I just go through one of the houses? I.e., why don't I take a shortcut? So, right, Kapandria is like Admafikna Adri Eil B'ha. Kapandria, Admafik, I don't know, Makifna, that's like the Kapa, and the Dri is the Ri, you get it? Amr Babo says, if initially the synagogue, there was a path there, and then they built the synagogue on top of it, so then you can continue to use it as a shortcut. Amr Nachman bar Yitzchak Kanichnas Amnas Shelo Lasos Kapandria says Nachman bar Yitzchak, he says, look, if you went into the synagogue without the intention to make it into a shortcut, if you then, once you're inside, you say, you know what, I actually need to go out the other side, so then that's okay. As long as you don't go in with the intention of making it a shortcut, if you end up sort of passing through, that's what ends up happening, then that's fine, as long as it wasn't your initial intention. Says the name of Rav Huna, a fellow who enters into a synagogue to pray, so you can end up making it a shortcut. You go to the synagogue to pray, so if you want to leave on the other side, on the way out, which Memela means you're cutting through, that's okay. As the pasuk says, that when the Yidden would come before God on the festivals, a fellow who would come in through the northern gate, would exit by the southern gate. So you basically go from one side of the Beis Hamikdash to the other. So we see that as long as you're coming to pray, it's not a problem if you end up going out the other side and sort of using it as a path. If there were grasses that grew on this temple that was desolate, lo yitlosh mipnei agmas nefesh, do not uproot them, because we want you to sort of feel modna when you see the synagogue that's overgrown and destroyed. But 1 second, we have a brisa that says that you would not be allowed to, chop the grass and feed them to your animals, but you'd be able to just pick up the grass and just leave it, mow it. So yes, so our Mishnah, when it says don't uproot the grass, it means don't uproot the grass and feed it to your animals. Tanan, Michael Tanan, that's what we're talking about in our Mishnah. We're talking about we're saying don't uproot the grass and feed it to your animals. Tana Rabbanan, the rabbis taught, that in a cemetery we don't act with lightheadedness. We don't, we're serious at a cemetery. And we don't graze animals in a cemetery. And we don't pass a stream of water through the cemetery. Okay. And we don't pick the grasses. Alright, and if you pick them, so then you gotta burn them in their place out of the honor of the dead. Hey, what's the deal with the honor of the dead thing? Ilema Sefer, if we're talking about that, it's at the, talking about the last thing in the brisa, which is, don't burn, don't pick these grasses, right? And if you did, then you have to burn them. So, what does that have to do with the honor? What does burning the grasses that you plucked in their place have to do with the honor of the dead? So Ella Aresha, it's talking about on the first part, right? Don't go into a cemetery lightheadedly and be joking around. Don't do that out of the honor of the dead. The honor of the dead, sort of be serious in a cemetery. Alright, friends, now we get to a new Mishnah, okay? Rosh Chodesh Adar Cholios b'Shabbos, alright? So if Rosh Chodesh of Adar falls out on Shabbos, alright? According to Parsha Shkolim, so we read the Parsha of Shkolim, alright? What do you want me to tell you? Cholios b'Socha Shabbos, if Rosh Chodesh Adar falls out in the middle of Shabbos, Makdim l'Shavar. So the previous Shabbos you read Parsha Shkolim. Umafsikin the Shabbos Acheres, and then you have a break for a week. Bashniya Zohar, and then the week after that is Parsha Zohar, which is right before, it's the Shabbos before Purim. Bashlish is Para, then the week after Purim, it's Parshas Para, Aduma, Barvias, and then the week after that, HaChodesh. It's HaChodesh is Elochem. Alright. b'chamishes, and then after that, chozun l'chsidron, they just go back to the regular order of like parshas. Lakom afsikin, Rosh Chodashim, Chanukah, Purim, Tanios of Ma'amodos of Yom Kippurim. You always stop like the regular laning. So, for example, I don't know, always parshas Miketz, not always, but generally parshas Miketz is like on Chanukah. So, for example, normally on Monday and Thursday we read the parsha of the week, right? So on Monday and Thursday, if the upcoming parsha is Miketz, so you'd be reading Miketz. However, if it's Chanukah, which it usually is, so then you wouldn't read Miketz on Chanukah, you would read Chanukah on Chanukah, for example, right? So whenever, right? So Rosh Chodashim, Chanukah. So Rosh Chodesh you read like the Rosh Chodesh. So Kilu, if I don't know, Monday or Thursday is Rosh Chodesh, so you read the Rosh Chodesh laning. B'Chanukah, B'Purim, B'Tanios, B'Hamados, B'Yom Kippurim, Kilu, in all these situations, you would read the reading that's specific for that day, rather than like the default, which is like the Parshas HaShavua. Alright, so friends, so we just discussed the like 4 parshas, right? Everybody's familiar with these 4 parshas, right? That around the Purim time, so we have Parshas Shkolim, which is right before Rosh Chodesh Adar, and then we said we take a break for a week, and then there's Parshas Zocher, which is right before Purim. Then right after Purim is Parshas Parah, and then Parshas HaChodesh, right? That that prepares you for like Pesach. HaChodesh is Elochem, for the Korban Pesach. Fine. Says the Gemara Tananosim, we learn over there in Shkolim, Be'echad Ba'adar Mashmin Ala Shkolim. Then on the first of Adar, we, let people know, like, hey, people, time to organize your coins to donate to the temple. And we also say, regarding mixtures that are not allowed. For example, like grapes and wheat, you can't plant them together. So if you notice that these mixtures are emerging, so make sure to get rid of them. So Bishlama ala kilayim dizman zuriyahi. So I understand why on Rosh Chodesh Adar we let people know, like, hey, better, make sure that there's no kilayim in your fields, because like things are growing at that point, at that time, and you have to be careful. There's no kilayim. Ela ala shkolim min. How come Rosh Chodesh Adar is a good time to let people know that they need to organize their shekels? So Amr Tevi, Amr Yoshia, to Amr Cross. It says Tevi in the name of Yoshia, that the pasuk says Zos Olas Chodesh b'Chodsho, that this is the Ola of the month in its month, L'Chodshei Hashana, right? It also says for the months of the year. Kilu, it says month, it says Chadash a whole bunch of times. So what do we learn from that? So Amr Torah, that the Torah says Chadesh Vavei Korban Mitruma Chadasha, that bring a korban from the Chadesh, from the Chadash, that bring korbanos from the new shkalim, that comes Nisan. You should be purchasing offerings, animals from the new funds. And as Rashi points out, it also says by Nisan Rishonu Lachem L'Chodshei Hashana, that it's the first for you of the Chodshei Hashana, right? The Chodashim. So just like it says, Zos Olas Chodesh b'Chodsho, so that's like Rishonu Lachem L'Chodshei Hashana by Nisan, i.e. that when it comes to when Nisan arrives, bring the korbanos from the new coins that were collected. Okay. V'chevon the b'Nisan by akruve mitruma chadasha, and therefore since comes Nisan, you're going to be purchasing offerings from the new donations, the new shekel donations. Kadminam v'karinon be'echad ba'adar. So a month in advance, from the first of Adar, we start letting people know, like, hey, people, organize your shekels, because in a month from now we're going to be needing to purchase offerings from the new collection of shekels, so that they will be have the time to get their shekels to the temple. Kiman to look Reb Shimon ben Gamliel. So this sounds like it's taka not the opinion of Reb Shimon ben Gamliel. To Reb Shimon ben Gamliel, ha'amr shtei Shabbosos. Reb Shimon ben Gamliel's, I would imagine that if it was Reb Shimon ben Gamliel's opinion, he would say that all you need is 2 weeks, not a full month, right? Meaning the shekels have to make it to the temple by the 1st of Nisan. They already started making the announcements on the 1st of Adar, a month prior. Now, Reb Shimon ben Gamliel, his opinion, mistama, would be that they wouldn't need a full month, they would only need 2 weeks. The Tanya is, we learn in the Brisa, Sho'alim B'ilchos HaPesach, Kodem LePesach Shloshim Yom. that we start learning about the halachas of Pesach 30 days before Pesach. What's 30 days before Pesach? On Purim. So on Purim already, at least Shushan Purim, we could start learning about the halachas of Pesach. Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel Omer Shtei Shabbosos. So Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel says you don't need a whole month, 2 weeks is enough. And therefore, I would think that according to Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel, you would only need 2 weeks to prepare for the Machzis HaShekel. So Afilu Teim Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel, you can even say that it's Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel. Kevin Damar Mar, because since we said B'chamisha Asabo Shulchan Yoshvim B'Medina U'V'chav Yoshvim B'Mikdash, well, since we said that already from the 15th of Adar you have these money changers who are setting up shop outside of the Beis Hamikdash, and on the 25th of Adar they're setting up shop in the Beis Hamikdash, Mishum Shulchanos Kadminun V'Karinun, and therefore Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel, who says that 2 weeks is enough for preparation, he would just say that yes, 2 weeks from the money changers. The money changers would set up shop already on the 15th of Adar, so 2 weeks prior to that, it would be, which is Rosh Chodesh Adar, is when you make the announcement to start organizing your shekels. But even Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel would agree that it would be the 1st of Adar, but the 2 weeks is not relative to when you start buying things with the new shekels. The 2 weeks is relative to when the money changers start setting up shop in Yerushalayim. My Parsha Shkalim. So what is this Parsha Shkalim? Okay, we've been talking about there's 4 Parshas. Parsha Shkalim, Parsha Zachor, Parsha Parah, Parsha Zachodesh. What is Parsha Shkalim? What do you read anyways? So Rav Amr says, Rav, Tzavas b'nei Yisrael v'amarta aleim es kor b'nei lachmi. Rav says, you know what Parsha Shkalim is? It's Parsha's Korban Atomid. It's Kor b'nei lachmi li'ishai, Reach nichochi, Tishmu l'akriv li b'moado. U'shmuel Amr Shmuel says, Kisisa, that it's the Parsha of Parsha's Kisisa, right? The first part of Parsha's Kisisa. B'shlomo l'man da'amr Kisisa. So I understand Shmuel, who says that it's Parsha's Kisisa, Hanu dekar le Parsha Shkalim. That's why it's called Parsha Shkalim. Tichsiv b'Shkalim, because in Parsha's Kisisa it's talking about, right? Kisisa osh b'nei Yisrael v'kodem v'nosnu ish kofer nafsho. What was it? Hashem of korosam, whatever, right? Kol over al apikudim machzis hashekel b'shekel hakodesh, something like that, right? That everyone has to donate a half shekel. So the Gemara says, look, I understand Shmuel's opinion. Parsha Shkalim is Parsha's Kisisa, which talks about Shkalim, which talks about shekels. Helmadamar is Korban Ilachmi, Hachmi di Shkalim Ksive, Hasam. So Rav, who says that Parsha Shkalim is really just the Parsha of the Talmud, the Parsha Satomid, right? It's Korban Ilachmi di Ishai. What does that have to do with shekels? So the Gemara answers in time of my Reb Tevi, that it's like Reb Tevi. That what did Reb Tevi say? That it says, right, that it teaches that on the 1st of Nisan you have to bring the korbanos from the new shekels. So we see that it's korban ilach milishai, right? The Parshas Atomid also mentions the shkalim, or at least refers to them. So I understand Rav's opinion that Parsha Shkalim is it's korban ilachmi mishum dichsive korbanos awesome, because it says korbanos over there. Could do Reb Tevi, like Reb Tevi, and it talks about the shekels that we're going to be using to purchase the korbanos. Elman da'amar kisis or korbanos miksive shkalim la'adanim ksive, right? But according to Shmuel, who says that Parsha Shkalim is Parshas Kisisa, well, if you think about it, sure, they were talking about collecting half shekels in Parshas Kisisa, but for the purpose of just creating infrastructure for the Mishkan, but not for buying korbanos. Now, if the whole point of the Machzis HaShekel is in order to buy korbanos from the new shkalim, so I understand Rav's verse, which is as korban ilach milisha, because it's talking about shkalim that they're going to be collecting for korbanos. But according to Shmuel, who says that what we read in Parsha Shkalim is Parshas Kisisa, so sure, it talks about shekels over there, but those shekels are for building infrastructure for the Mishkan, not for purchasing korbanos. So, Kedutani Rav Yosef, so it's like Rav Yosef teaches, Shalosh Trumosein, that the Torah mentions in Parshas Kisisa 3 types of trumas. Shal mizbeach, la mizbeach, v'shal adonim, la adonim, v'shal bedek habayis, la bedek habayis. That there's certain machzos shekels that go for the mizbeach, for korbanos, certain machzos shekels that go for the brackets, and then certain donations that go to the temple treasury. So we see that even by kisisa, it's not only talking about the shekels for the brackets, it's also talking about shekels for korbanos. Mishlam the Amr kisisa anu Deshani Hayrush Chodesh Misharush Rosh Chodesh. Says the Gemara, I understand Shmuel's opinion that Parshas Shkalim is Parshas Kisisa. That makes Parshas Shkalim different than all the other Rosh Chodeshes, right? The Mishnah had said that when Rosh Chodesh Adar falls out on Shabbos, so we read Parshas Shkalim on Shabbos, on that Shabbos. Now, if Parshas Shkalim is like Rav, that it's as Korban Lachmi, well, that's what we read every Rosh Chodesh. So then what makes Rosh Chodesh Adar significant and unique? But if you say like Shmuel, that Parshas Shkalim is Parshas Kisisa, so in that way, Parshas Shkalim is unique, and that usually on Rosh Chodesh we read as Korban Lachmi. Now we're reading Parshas Kisisa instead. Or at least in addition, I don't know, we're reading Parshas Kisisa. So again, so b'shlamim the Amar Kisisa anu deshani hayrush chodesh misharush chodashim. So if you're like Shmuel and you're saying that we're reading Parshas Kisisa on Parshas Shkalim, so that makes Parshas Shkalim different than every other Rosh Chodesh. Elaman the Amar tavis korbani my shani. So, but if you're like Rav, who says that Parshas Shkalim is this Korban Lachmi Liishai, well then that's what we read every Rosh Chodesh. What makes Parshas Shkalim unique? So Shani di ilu Rosh Chodeshim karu shisa binyani diyoma v'chad b'Rosh Chodesh. Well, it is different because in general on Rosh Chodesh you would read the first 6 parshas, the first 6 aliyahs of Shabbos would be the parsha of the week, and the seventh aliyah would be Rosh Chodesh, would be his Korban Lachmi Lishai. V'lu ha'idna, but on Parshas Shkalim kulu b'Rosh Chodesh, they're all Rosh Chodesh, right? So Kilu, it's different in that. So even according to Rav, who says that Parshas Shkalim is Korban Lachmi Liishai, so nonetheless, it's different than every other Rosh Chodesh, because every other Rosh Chodesh that falls out on Shabbos, only the 7th aliyah would be as Korban Lachmi Liishai, whereas on Parshas Shkalim, all 7 aliyahs are as Korban Lachmi Liishai. All right, fine. So that makes sense according to the Man Amar, who says that the Mishnah had said, so you have Parshas Shkalim, and then Parshas Zachor, and then Parshas Para, and then Parshas Chodesh, and then on the 5th one you go back to the regular stuff that you do. So according to the opinion who says that on the 5th week you go back to the regular stuff that you do, it means that you go back to the regular parshas, that we completely took a break when it was Parshas Shkalim and Parshas Zachor and Parshas Parah and Parshas Apar. We suspended the Torah reading that we usually read on Shabbos and instead only read these parshas. So if that's the case, then I understand what we just said, that on Parshas Shkalim we only read Tzavos Bnei Yisrael Amarta Aleim, and in that way it's different than every other Rosh Chodesh where we would reserve that only for the 7th aliyah. But on Parshas Shkalim we read it for all the aliyahs. So Lamanda Amr l'Seder Aftarus Uchozer Ufarshas Diyoma Karinon. However, according to the opinion, it says that no, on the 5th week when we go back, it means that we just go back to the regular Haftarahs, but we were reading the Parshas of Shavua throughout. So then, my shani. So then, what makes Parshas Shkalim different than any other Rosh Chodesh that falls out on Shabbos? Right? Kilu, according to Rav, who says that Parshas Shkalim is as Korban Lachmi Liishai. Well, then, what makes Parshas Shkalim any different than any other Rosh Chodesh that falls out on Shabbos? And if the opinion is that even during these 4 parshas, Parshas Shkalim, Parshas Zachor, Parshas Parah, Parshas Chodesh, we're still reading the regular weekly parsha. Well, in that case, then only the 7th aliyah is going to be as Korban Lachmi Liishai, in which case it's the same as every time Rosh Chodesh falls out on Shabbos. So Shani di ilu Rosh Chodashim karu shisa binyan diyom avchad kari b'Rosh Chodesh. Well, the difference in the sense that on a normal Shabbos you would read, right, when Rosh Chodesh falls out on Shabbos, you would read 6 aliyahs of the Parshas HaShavua of that week's Parsha, and the 7th aliyah would be Es Korban Ilach Milisha, would be for Rosh Chodesh. Now, practically speaking, we would do the maftir would be the Rosh Chodesh, but I guess this is the opinion that the 7th aliyah would be the Rosh Chodesh aliyah. Okay, the ilu ha'idna, but on Parsha Shkalim karu tlasu binyana diyoma, so you would read 3 aliyahs of the Parsha of the Shavua, ve'arba karu b'Rosh Chodesh, and 4 of them would read as Korban Ilach Mid'ishai on Parsha Shkalim. Okay, fine. So that's how Rav would explain what makes Parsha Shkalim different than any other Rosh Chodesh that falls out on Shabbos. If Parsha Shkalim is reading as Korban Ilach Mid'ishai, fine. Meisve, we have a kasha. Rosh Chodesh Adar Shchalios b'Shabbos. So if Rosh Chodesh Adar falls out on Shabbos, Korid b'Parsha Shkalim. So we read Parsha Shkalim. Umaftirin b'Yoyada HaKohen. And the Haftorah is Yoyada. The Navi that we read is Yoyada. So I understand according to Shmuel, who says that we read Kisisa, that explains why we read a Haftorah, why we read from the Navi of Yoyada HaKohen to Damile, because it's similar. As it says, the money of his value. But if you say like Rav that it's as Korban Ilach Mid'ishai, what does that have to do with Yehoyada? Right, where it talks about this money that they're collecting. So Dami Kedur Reb Tevi. What do you mean? It's similar like Reb Tevi says that it says by it's Korban Ilach Mid'ishai. It says right Zos Olas Chodesh B'Chod Shel Chodesh Yeshan Chadesh V'Avei. Right. Make sure to bring from the new collection, and therefore, as Korban Ilach Mid'ishai is talking about a collection, and therefore it does make sense, even according to Rav, that we read from the Navi about Yehoyada. Fine. Meisvei, we have a kasha on Rav Cholios beParsha Asmuchala Ben Milfanea Ben Milacharel, that if Purim that if Parsha Shkalim, that if Rosh Chodesh Adar falls out on the Parsha that is right next to what you would read in Parsha Shkalim, so Bein Milfanei Bein Milacharei, whether before it, whether after it, Korin Osav V'Chol Fenosos, and you read it twice. Okay, let's just go weiter for a second. So that can make sense if it's Kisisa. So Kilu, if we're saying that in Parsha Shkalim, you're reading from Parshas Kisisa, and we're saying that if Rosh Chodesh Adar falls out on Shabbos, and we're reading Parsha Shkalim, and then it happens to be that the next week is also the Torah reading that we just read in Parsha Shkalim, so we read it twice. So it makes sense if you say that Parsha Shkalim is Parshas Kisisa. How do you do Zimna? Because Kisisa falls out around Purim time, around other time. But if you say like Rav that Parsha Shkalim is as Korban Ilach Mid'ishai, which is in Parshas Pinchas doesn't fall out around Purim time. So for the Gemara yes it does. Livnei Ma'arava Damaskil D'Oraisa B'Tlas Shnin. Then Eretz Yisrael, where they don't go through the entire Torah every year, they go through the entire Torah over the course of 3 years. Not nowadays in Eretz Yisrael, but I guess at that point in Eretz Yisrael. So then it could fall out that Parshas Pinchas is around that time. Alright. Tanekavasa de Shmuel, we have a brayso supporting Shmuel, Rosh Chodesh Adar Shchalios b'Shabbos, that if Rosh Chodesh Adar falls out on Shabbos, Korin Kisisa, so we dafka read Parshas Kisisa, Umaftirin b'Yoyada HaKohen, so we see that Parshas Shkalim is Taka Parshas Kisisa. Amar B'Yitzchak Nafcha, says B'Yitzchak Nafcha, Rosh Chodesh Adar Shchalios b'Shabbos, that if Rosh Chodesh Adar falls out on Shabbos, Motzin Shalosh Torahs, so you bring out 2 Torahs. V'korin boen echad b'nyan shayom. So one of the Torahs are for that week's parsha. V'echad b'shorosh chodesh, and one of them for Rosh Chodesh. V'echad b'chisisa. and then the other one being for Kisisa. So 3 Sefer Torahs, Kisisa for Shkalim. V'amar Bitzchak Nafcha, says Bitzchak Nafcha, Rosh Chodesh Teves Chalios b'Shabbos, that when Rosh Chodesh Teves falls out on Shabbos, Mevin Shalosh Torahs, we take out 3 Torahs, V'korin Boen, and we read from them Echad Binyan Shel Yom. One of them you read the Parsha of the week, V'echad B'Rosh Chodesh, and one of them for Rosh Chodesh, V'echad B'Chanukah, and one of the Torahs is for reading the Chanukah Torah reading. Utzricha, and we needed to teach both cases, both the case of when Shabbos Chanukah and Shabbos Rosh Chodesh Adar. The Idmar Beha, that if it only mentioned Parsha Shkalim, Be'aka Amar Bitzchak. So here, if you'd only mention Chanukah, so then I would say that that when it comes to Chanukah, you need 3 Sifrei Torah because you need for the Parsha of the week, for Rosh Chodesh, and for Chanukah. But when it comes to Parsha Shkalim, Kirav Sfirle, maybe I would say that Rabbi Yitzchak Nafcha holds like Rab, that when Parsha Shkalim is Korban Lachmi, Uv'shtei Torah Sagi, that Parsha Shkalim is as Korban Lachmi, which is the same reading as Rosh Chodesh. So if it's like Rab, then all you would need is 2 Sifrei Torah, one for the Parsha of the week, one for as Korban Lachmi Lishai from Parshas Pinchas. And therefore, it's not enough to say just Rosh Chodesh Tevis, you also have to mention Rosh Chodesh Adar. Fine. So why don't you only mention Rosh Chodesh Adar, that you take out 3 Sifrei Torah, one for the Parsha of the week, one for Rosh Chodesh, one for Kisisa, for Parsha Shkalim. And then I know that also on Rosh Chodesh Tevis you take out 3 Sifrei Torah, one for the Parsha of the week, one for Rosh Chodesh and one for Chanukah. The Gemara says, Einachinami. Truth is, all Rabbi Yitzchak Nafcha actually said is that by Parsha Shkalim you take out 3 Sifrei Torah, and then we just inferred that when it comes to Chanukah, the same would be true, that you would take out 3 Sifrei Torah. Idmar was stated Rosh Chodesh Teves Chalios B'chol, that when Rosh Chodesh Teves falls out during the week. Amar Bitzchak Nafcha, says Rabbi Yitzchak Nafcha, Karu Tlasa Rosh Chodesh. So the first 3 aliyahs are going to be for Rosh Chodesh, V'chad B'Chanukah, and the 4th one is for Chanukah. For Avdimi Dimin Chayfa Amar, says Avdimi from Chayfa, Karu Tlasa B'Chanukah, then no, the first 3 are for Chanukah, V'chad Rosh Chodesh, and the 4th aliyah is going to be for Rosh Chodesh. Amar Rabmani, says Rabmani Kavasa de Rabbi Yitzchak Nafcha Mistava. It makes sense like Rabbi Yitzchak Nafcha, the Tada V'sheinu Tada Kodim, that when you have an option between something that comes all the time regularly and something that's irregular, so you give preference to the regular one. And therefore, since Rosh Chodesh falls out more often than Chanukah does, so therefore the first 3 aliyahs should be Rosh Chodesh, and the 4th one is Chanukah. Rabbi Avin, says Rabbi Avin Kavasa de Rav Dimi Mistava, that Ataka makes more sense like Rav Dimi, Migarim L'Revi Sheyavo, Rosh Chodesh. What caused there to be 4 aliyahs, right? Generally on Chanukah there's 3 aliyahs. How come today there's 4? Because it's Rosh Chodesh. So Hilkach Revi Rosh Chodesh by Mikre. So therefore, if the 4th aliyah is coming because it's Rosh Chodesh, then the 4th aliyah should be talking about Rosh Chodesh, not about Chanukah. So Ma'av Allah said to be paskin. Rav Yosef, says Rav Yosef. So Rav Yosef Amar, a mashkichin Rosh Chodesh. We do not give precedence to Rosh Chodesh. Rather, we give precedence to Chanukah. The Rabba Amar, says Rabba, a mashkichin b'Chanukah. We do not give precedence to Chanukah. And the halacha is we do not give precedence to Chanukah, rather we give precedence to Rosh Chodesh. And the first 3 aliyos on Rosh Chodesh Chanukah are going to be for Rosh Chodesh, and the 4th one will be for Chanukah. Friends, that was the Chav Tes of Masechta Megillah. The first part of the daf was just like a bunch of interesting agaritas. Then we got into the 4 parshas that we read around Purim and Pesach time. Parshas Shkalim, Parshas Zachor, Parshas Parah, and Parshas HaChodesh. And we saw machlokas between Rav and Shmuel about what exactly is Parshas Shkalim. Rav says Parshas Shkalim is basically the same thing that we read on Rosh Chodesh, which is as Korban Lachmi Li'ishai. And Shmuel says that Parshas Shkalim is Kisisa. And we seem to be paskening that like Shmuel, that Parshas Shkalim is Kisisa. And then, interestingly, the Gemara mentioned different cases where we bring out 3 Sifrei Torah. For example, Shabbos, Rosh Chodesh, Chanukah, or Parshas Shkalim, we bring out 3 Sifrei Torah. Friends, that was Daf Chav Tes. I hope you enjoyed. Peace out.